When you think of collectibles, you'll often think of fine wine, art, classic cars, or rare stamps. All of these investments have the opportunity for uncorrelated returns, and they can also be particularly interesting and exciting. But not everyone has the money or the required knowledge to buy the right case of wine or the right classic Ferrari. For example, a 1967 Ferrari 275 Spider recently sold for $27.5 million in the United States. But when it comes to collectibles, it can be just as much about luck as it is about knowledge and money when it comes to investing. In this short video, I'd like to look at some of the benefits and risks of investing in collectibles, and also look at how investors can gain access to this sector. I will also look at some of the key questions investors and their advisors should be asking as part of any due diligence they undertake. Collectibles can provide a number of benefits to investors. They are largely uncorrelated from the stock market and provide some really good diversification for investors. They are also very interesting and emotional investments, and as they are real assets, they can often be an inflation hedge. Many collectibles represent the perfect supply curve. When a bottle of wine is opened and drunk, supply reduces. When stamps are lost or damaged, supply reduces. Also with art, for example, if the artist unfortunately dies, then no more art can be produced, and therefore the price usually increases. Collectibles have the potential for very high returns, but as with many investments, it can really depend on when you choose to invest and when you choose to sell and exit the investment. Take fine wine, for example. We look at the LIVX 100, which looks at the top 100 fine wines available in the market and is often used as a benchmark for the sector. Over the last 5 years, from July 2008, this index has only increased by 3%. But if you were waited and invested in December 2008, you'd now be sitting on a 32% return. We also can look at rare stamps in this case. The GB30 Stanley Gibbons Rare Stamps Index has increased by 68% over the same 5-year period from July 2008. Collectibles are also generally uncorrelated with the stock market. But in 2008, when the stock market crashed, people took their money out of traditional stock market assets, but also cut back on spending on luxuries. In the last couple of years, people have started putting money back into collectibles, and we've seen some growth in the sector recently. Think of bankers with high salaries and big bonuses. They can afford to spend their money on fine wine, art, or classic cars. Collectibles are unregulated investments and often include the direct purchase of a physical asset. This means that investors need specific industry knowledge in order to know which wine or stamp to buy and when to buy in and when to sell. Unfortunately, this has left the sector open to abuse in recent years, and there have been a number of high-profile investment scams involving fine wine in particular. Stamps, fine wine and art are only worth what someone is willing to pay for them. There is also not always a ready-made secondary market for these investments, and it can be very hard for investors to exit. As these investments are physical assets, they can be very illiquid, and it is often not easy for investors to realise their value particularly quickly. Investors may need to look to auction houses or dealers in order to help them sell the asset, and this can result in higher costs, and it also doesn't guarantee a sale. Despite these risks, certain collectibles have become much more mainstream in recent years. Stamps and fine wine, for example, now have widely recognised industry benchmarks, and these help to provide some clarity and transparency to very specialist sectors. The stamps is provided by Stanley Gibbons, and LIVX provide the fine wine index. The main problem with these two indexes is they only track the top of the market. Stamps, for example, with the GB30 and GB250 look at the top 30 and top 250 stamps in the market, and the LIVX 100 tracks the top 100 bottles of fine wine. So do they really give a true representation of the performance of the sector? Well, with fine wine, for example, only 0.1% of the wine produced on an annual basis is actually of investment quality. so it's very easy to pay over the odds for a bottle of wine that may never increase in value. So what products are available to investors? Well, most collectibles are directly held assets, but investors can also gain access to the sector through unregulated collective investment schemes, otherwise referred to as UCITS. UCITS are restricted in their promotion to only high net worth and sophisticated investors, so this takes them out of scope for most retail investors looking at the sector. Directly held collectibles are physical assets and therefore classed as tangible movable property. This means that they cannot be held within a personal pension, such as a SIPP. Fine wine, though, can be held within a SIPP as long as it is stored securely by a third party, and this means that the investor cannot gain any personal use from the asset. There are now a number of companies available that offer investors access to fine wine, art and rare stamps, and investors can also gain access to this sector through the use of auction houses and dealers. Fine wine and stamps are probably the two most mainstream collectible investments, and there has been a large amount of focus on retail investors in recent years. Direct investments start from as low as £250, but investors should be aware that there could be high ongoing costs, such as storage. For UCITS funds, the minimum investment could be £5,000, and investors gain access to industry knowledge and management through investing in these funds. Industry knowledge and management is essential for collectibles and may not be available if investing directly. When considering any investment, due diligence is particularly important. This can help the investor and their advisor understand the risks involved with the investment and helps the advisor be sure that the investment is suitable for the investor. But when we look at collectibles and other directly held assets, it is important for the advisor to take their due diligence and fact-finding one step further. Some of the key questions that the advisor should be asking of any collectible investment includes: who is the product provider? Are they regulated, or do they have a track record or a history in the sector? What is the asset? How is the asset owned, and how do you know that it's genuine? What costs are involved with the investment, such as annual management charges, storage fees, VAT, or is there a markup or a bid offer spread when you buy the asset? Also, what may be the returns? Is there a benchmark to compare the returns against? And are they realistic? And also, how does the investor exit the investment? Is there a ready-made secondary market? And are there going to be high costs when the investor chooses to sell? Accessibility is a big obstacle for investors to overcome. With collectibles, to build a well-diversified portfolio, you need upwards of £10,000 to invest. There is no point buying one piece of art or one box of fine wine, as this is just like putting all of your eggs in one basket. Collectibles are a risky asset, and investors should have a high tolerance for risk and a high capacity for loss if they consider investing. For most investors, if they do choose to invest in collectibles, they should only make up a small proportion of an investment portfolio, say 5%. Collectibles are likely to be an emotional investment. The majority of people that collect stamps or art will class themselves as collectors rather than investors. These assets tend to be held for the long term, and any increase in price could be considered a bonus. There is, though, an enjoyment out of holding and owning collectibles. You can drive a nice classic car, wear a nice Rolex, or look at a nice piece of art. In conclusion, collectibles is an interesting sector with some assets that can provide some really good benefits to investors. But there are a number of risks to be aware of. The sector has been and is open to abuse, and returns are very risky and unpredictable. For more information on collectibles or other real assets, please contact Intelligent Partnership. Thank you for listening.